It's April 10th, 10:30 a.m. Eastern U.S. time, so we'll get started. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Welcome to the April Team Studio and TLCC webinars. I would like to introduce my co-hosts, Paul Delanebbia and Howard Greenberg from TLCC. And I'd like to welcome our speakers, Mark Roden, Jesse Gallagher, and Ulrich Krause, who will be presenting Ask the XPages Expert. My name is Courtney. I'm the Inbound Marketing Specialist at Team Studio and one of your co-hosts today. Before we start talking about today's topic, I'm going to take a few minutes to tell you who we are and what we do at Team Studio. I'll then be passing the controls over to Howard at TLCC so he can do the same, and then we'll dive right into today's topic. Before we get started, we have a few administrative things to cover. To protect your privacy, the attendee list is not public, so you'll only see yourself as an attendee. All attendees are muted during this session, so participation will be through the chat window and Q&A panel on the WebEx ribbon on your screen. Use the chat window if you have a general question or comment, and the Q&A panel for your questions to the speakers. Today's format will be a little different than usual in that the majority of it will be Q&A. Howard's going to explain how this will work in more detail when he takes over the meeting in a few minutes. This session is being recorded and the link will be sent to you in a follow-up email in a few days. So a little bit about Team Studio. We may have assisted you in the past with application development. We've been delivering innovative developer tools and productivity tools to the Notes and Domino community since 1996. Where we specialize in source code control, version management, and source code management. And we moved into the mobile application arena in 2010 with Unplugged. Unplugged gives you the ability to extend your Notes apps out to mobile devices. The unique thing about it is that it leverages the powerful technology of XPages and provides a native app experience for the user. And these apps have the capability to function when offline. We recently released Unplugged 3.0. This new version runs apps twice as fast and development of apps is easier than ever. For more information, click on the banner on the Team Studio homepage. We're very proud to have been the recipient of 2 IBM Collaboration Solutions Awards for Unplugged in 2013 and earlier this year. In January this year at the Connect conference, IBM awarded Unplugged with the Best of Show and Chief Technology Officer Award. And at IBM Partner World in February, IBM recognized the platform as a finalist for a Beacon Award. This product is available on all the major mobile platforms. In addition to Unplugged as a platform, which allows clients to create custom mobile apps, we provide off-the-shelf templates like Team Studio Continuity and OneView Approval. We recently announced an additional template named Customer View, which is a lightweight mobile CRM solution. With this, users have the ability to view, edit, and manage customer info, and they also have access to large media files. If you'd like a demo of any of these products, just contact me during this webinar using the chat window I mentioned, or contact us directly from our website or by phone. So looking forward, our Wireless Wednesdays webinar series continues with part 4 on May 7th. This 4-part free monthly series presented by Matt White and Rich Sharp guides developers through Notes and Domino mobile development. Part 4 takes a deep dive into jQuery mobile. Our next webinar with TLCC will be on May 13th with Paul Withers and Mike McGarrell on XPages development. Scroll to the bottom of the Team Studio homepage for more info and to register for these free webinars. And lastly, before I pass it back over to Howard, we're currently running a promotion on the administration interface for Unplugged. If you demo this admin console before April 30th, you'll be entered to win a Galaxy Tab 3. So just click on the banner on the Team Studio homepage for more information about this. So with that, I'd like to pass the controls back over to Howard so he can do a little intro about TLCC, and then we'll get started with today's topic.
Thank you, Courtney. And welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our webinar, our monthly series. So you should be seeing my screen right about now.
Yep, looks good, Howard.
Okay, thanks, Courtney. Okay, again, my name is Howard Greenberg, a partner here at TLCC, and along with Paul, my partner, we're going to be your host today for this webinar. This is something we've done in the past where we'll kind of warm things up with a short presentation by our three expert XPagers, and then they'll basically whatever time we have left, which there should be lots of time, will just be open for your questions. So hopefully you get brought some good questions or start thinking about some questions now. They do not, the questions do not have to be on the topics our panelists are going to talk about. They can be on anything as long as it has to do with XPages. So don't ask us about the weather or whatever. So we probably can't help you. But anything XPages, excuse me, anything XPages related, we'll do our best to try to answer them. A little bit about TLCC. We've been around for quite a while, since 1997, and we've always have done self-paced distance learning courses for Notes and Domino, for developers, admins, and users. We started getting into XPages courses back when XPages was still in beta. It's actually when we started developing our first course. We also do on-site private classes, or we can do web-based, live instructor-based classes to your teams. We also do mentoring and consulting, so if you need some help with an XPages app or anything Domino related, development or admin, let us know. And our best-selling courses are free demo courses. We have an Intro to XPages development course out there. So if you have not done anything in XPages yet, I urge you to go to our website at the top right corner. You'll see a link to try a free course. And it's a nice 3-hour introduction and get you started building your first XPages app. As Courtney mentioned, we got 2 webinars on the schedule right now. The first one, Mike McArrow and Paul Withers are going to present a session they did at Connect. It's kind of basically they're going through 9 tips about XPages, but they presented in a theme based on Dante's 9 Circles of Heaven. This is a lot of fun. Last year they did the Greek mythology, and so it's just a kind of a fun way to look at it. And you will learn something. One of these tips will be something you can definitely apply in your real-life applications. And then in June, we got Mark Lusink is going to present a project he got involved in called Bootstrap for XPages. Many of you are familiar with Mark, and he's been working with Bootstrap for a while. But this project, Bootstrap for XPages, if you haven't worked with it yet, we did demonstrate it in our March webinar. You basically can take the application layout control that's in the in Domino 9 and immediately apply the Bootstrap theme to it. So Mark's going to dive a lot more into that project, some additions he's made to it, and some plans that he has for the future. So I really urge everyone to try to attend that that webinar in June. The link is on the screen. Also on that link, you will find all our previous webinars going back a couple of years, links to the YouTube recording and the slides and demo databases if there was one. Also, this is a first for us in April. The end of the month, we have a admin webinar. So we've been doing mostly XPages and developer topics. This is, at the moment, not going to be a series, but depending on the attendance and the topics and the speakers that we find, we might do these on a somewhat regular basis. So tell your admins, or if you're also an admin, be sure you attend on April 24th. Okay, so a little bit about the questions and answers. Again, that's mostly what we're going to do today is Q&A. And the way you're going to ask your questions is in the WebEx interface at the top of the screen, there should be a little Q&A button. If for some reason you don't see it, there's a drop-down arrow that's to the right of the ribbon bar where I'm pointing to now. The Q&A panel might be there, but most likely it's just right on the top. Ask your questions there. You can start asking them now. And Paul and I will then take your questions and be the moderator and ask our panelists. And we kind of know each of these three folks what their strong points are. And of course, once one panelist responds, the other ones might also have some opinions. So one thing I'll caution you on, do not use the chat button. You want to use the Q&A button, not the chat button. We will not be monitoring the chat. So you should be able to see that. You'll also be able to see the as we answer them. So let's get started. Our three panelists are Jesse Gallagher, Ulrich Krause, and Mark Roden. And those are the topics that we're going to talk about. First up is going to be Jesse. Jesse, I think I spelled your name wrong on the slide. You have to fix that. So let me transfer controls over to Jesse. Where's our... And so Jesse, you should be getting presenter privileges now.
I spelled my name wrong, but at least there's no I in it. That's my main. That's my main problem.
I don't know how I not only spelled it wrong, but I totally obliterated the spelling of your first name. But we'll fix that and take it away, Jesse. We're just starting to see your screen now.
All right. Hello, as you mentioned, my name is Jesse Gallagher, and I'm primarily known for blogging about stuff. I work at a company called I Know Some Guys. We are a consulting contracting company in Pennsylvania. My topic today is going to be on recycling, specifically Domino objects, not real-world recycling, which is also a good idea, but dealing with Domino objects and when you need to recycle, when it's important, what languages it's needed in. And I'm going to give a brief nod to the OpenNTF API. I'm on the team that works on that, as was the guy originally going to do this presentation, Paul Withers. And one of the nice benefits, as I'll go into, is that that handles all of this recycling for you. So if you are willing to use the API, you can not pay attention to most of the things I'm going to tell you. So there are a number of misconceptions, and I think that it's mostly like when you're dealing with recycling, a lot of the main problems are dealing with misconceptions that people have. And one of them is that it's about memory management. And it's not really. I mean, it's sort of related to memory management, but it's not the same as storing a whole bunch of Java objects. And it's
hey,
also,
Jesse, this is Howard.
Yes.
I'm sorry for the interruption, but I am not only seeing something that says Event Center. Ah, there we go. Okay.
There we go.
Now we see a slide. Okay,
okay.
Thanks.
Sorry about that. I guess I had that on a second screen. I guess WebEx doesn't work too well. For that, my apologies. So recycling is not memory management. It's more akin to managing network connections. Like each individual document database session has a representation on the server side and the Domino side, and you can only have so many of those. They're not necessarily heavy on memory themselves, but you will often see these at the same time, mostly because a program that's using and building up lots and lots and lots of objects like documents and items and views and view entries will most likely also build a lot of Java objects and fill up your Java memory space. But they are very different. You can easily run out of handles, which is what is, or the Domino handles, those are what is being recycled. You can easily run out of those before you run out of memory, and you can easily run out of memory before you run out of Domino handles. So they are technically separate. They happen to appear often together, but they are not the same thing. So I know recycling has led to a lot of people feeling like Java is a language where you have to manage your memory, which is not the case. I mean, you certainly can run out of memory if you use too much, but Java is thoroughly garbage collected. It is not generally the programmer's job to worry about managing the lifetime of objects. It is a Domino specific thing, very similar to if you open up a connection to another server of some sort. So it's not just a problem when you're writing Java. If you're doing XPages development, any server JavaScript is using the same Domino object. So if you create a document, you create items, you go through a view, those are the same as the Java object. So it's not something specifically when you're just doing Java beans. If you're doing loops in server JavaScript, you have to worry about the same thing. And as I'll go into in a bit, you can also ignore recycling in the same situation. Those with Java is the same. Only LotusScript is safe from dealing with recycling, but it is still not worth it to use LotusScript. So when must you recycle? It's generally considered like the really good way to do it is to recycle every object, every Domino object you create as soon as you're done with it. I have often done this just for my own hygiene essentially, but you mostly need to worry about it when looping. The main time that Java comes into play is if you're looping through a large view, looping through all documents in a database, or simultaneously doing these things. Because what will happen is that in a naively designed loop, you will end up creating and fetching hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, depending on how large your database is, of view entries, date times, names, documents, items. And so if you're not recycling these in each iteration of the loop, you end up, the ones that you used in previous iterations will stick around until you're done with the individual request or agent. And so it's not so much a problem of worrying about every single one, it's worrying about how many you have open at the same time. And unless you close them in the loop, they stay open. One of the particularly nasty things is that things like names and date times are not children of the document. So even if you recycle the document in a loop, it doesn't cover those, which are their own weird special case. So the first thing you can do if you're running, especially if you're running into handle problems, but even if you're just writing any standard loop in Java or server JavaScript, the main thing is to make sure that you recycle your document or view entry at the end of the loop after going on to the next one, which I will demonstrate shortly. One of the gotchas is that if you are working with documents, say you loop through every document and you replace 10 items values, even if you don't do assign the result of replace item value to something, that's creating an item object with an associated handle. So if you're going through, say, 100 documents and you replace 10 items on each, you actually end up with 1,100 objects. You have 100 document objects, but then you also have 1,000 item objects as well. And so unless you're recycling the document at the end of each loop, you're creating all these and they'll build up over time. In an individual run of an agent or an individual request, it may not be a problem until the database gets larger and suddenly you're looping over 10,000 documents and now you have a problem that wasn't there before. So this is kind of the canonical way to loop through a set of documents. The same thing applies to view entries as well. This code is much the same. So what I'm doing here is going through a view, going through the documents, and then one of the important things is at the end you see the document temp doc equals doc, and then going through. So you have this 3-line block of assigning the doc to a temporary variable, then getting the next one, then recycling the temporary one. That's going to be basically one of the main things that you have to do. And so it's a matter of getting the next one, and then only after that recycling the previous one, because if you swap those orders around and recycle the document before getting the next one, you'll get an exception saying the document's already been recycled. So you have to do that, and then that will handle most of your problems. That will handle any items that were created. It will handle, primarily any items that were created dealing with it, and children of it, because recycling a object recycles all of its children, and so that will cover most of it. It won't cover date times or names. It won't cover anything else that's attached either to a database or to a session or a view. So anything else that you create that isn't coming from the document, you also want to recycle there. There's a little known method attached to every Domino object where it's still recycled, but you pass it a vector of anything. And so in this example here, I'm getting the column values from the document, which works because it's coming from a view. This would work the same for a view entry. And so at the end of it, I'm getting that once. And it's good for both recycling and performance that I'm getting it once at the start of the loop rather than getting it repeatedly, because it's actually surprisingly slow it's surprisingly slow to get column values multiple times, and so you want to do it once. But then at the end, you can just do doc.recycle on column values, and that will clear out any date times that are in there. That also applies to, like, you can actually call this method on any Domino object. One that takes a vector, doesn't recycle the object you're calling it on. It's a little weird, but this is a good hygiene thing. Or, and this is what I was saying at the start, you can easily just use the OpenNTF API. One of the nicest features of the OpenNTF API is that it takes care of recycling for you. Oh, by the way, I see a question here about recycling the view at the end. This is something I was saying at the beginning. If you're being really good about it, and certainly if you are dealing with a lot of views, you may want to manually recycle the views. But if you're running an agent that just goes through if it just goes through and deals with one view or like 3 views or something, you don't need to worry about it too much, because at the end of the execution of the agent or XPages request, that will be recycled along with everything else. So my rule of thumb is that if any of these rarely created objects, databases, views, maybe a document collection, you don't really need to recycle those specifically. It doesn't hurt unless you want to reuse it later, but it's most important to deal with the small ones that get created in batch. So it can be good, you don't need to. And I see another question about what is a vector. A vector is it's like an array that's what's returned by the Domino objects. So it's technically an implementation of Java's list, but I called it a vector specifically because the API expects vectors. So back to the OpenNTF API, it handles all this stuff for you. It piggybacks on Java's built-in garbage collection, and it handles all this recycling for you. So as soon as an object is no longer referenced by something else, such as going through a view, like if you're looping through a view, once a document is no longer referenced by anything and it's moved on, at some point the garbage collection is going to go take care of that object, and then at the same time the OpenNTF API will say, okay, this is being cleaned up, I will also recycle it for you. So you basically don't have to handle it. Nathan Freeman, the guy who did most of the work on this, he's done tests on hundreds and thousands and probably millions of entries, and it works great. So it's one of the nicest things. It just handles it for you. There's also all kinds of other nice features in the API. There's more documentation, helper classes, new methods, things like new comparison operations on date times, and all kinds of other bonus features. They work well with standard interfaces. So, like if, for example, if you want to loop over a view, you can now just use the built-in Java loop for all loop over the get all entries, rather than doing this get first entry while not null. It's much nicer. And basically, the API brings you happiness. That's one of the core features. It makes you a happier person. So I cannot recommend it enough, and not just because I'm one of the people working on it. I use it all the time in a couple of production applications. It's been working very, very nicely. I highly suggest you take it out, or check it out rather. So that's my whirlwind tour of recycling. And so I will be available in the Q&A for any other questions. And other than that, thank you, and I will pass it on to Ulrich.
Thank you, Jesse. Just have to share my screen. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Ulrich Krause. I'm an administrator and developer since 1993 and working as a senior software architect for BCC. BCC is a business partner, IBM business partner located in Frankfurt, Germany. I have a blog. You can follow my tweets on Twitter, and you can even email even after the session if you have more questions and want to have them answered. And I'm an IBM champion starting in 2011 and still are an IBM champion. So today I want to talk about multilingual applications and using Dojo in it, or using Dojo with multilingual applications would fit better. What will we learn? A few words about multilingual applications in general, and what are the issues with multilingual application, and how can we fix it? So first, for the few words, I had the chance to follow a fantastic session at Connect from Katie and Brad. The force tells me that Brad is on the panel here as an attendee. So I don't want to talk about how to multilingual enable an application at all. You can read this session slides and you will get a feeling how you can do it. It's almost complete. I say almost complete because what I'm missing here in this presentation is the pitfalls you can fall in when you dealing with multilingual applications. So what are the issues? You have to keep in mind when you build your application how to use not only one language, but if you have to use more than one language, you have to keep in mind or have to take into consideration how you use it. This can be a fixed setting, or the application language can depend on the browser the user is using, and this can lead to some confusion on the user side. Or you can let the user just choose the language, and these are the last two ones are the ones where the issue really comes into play. So, it's demo time. We all love demos. I switch over to my simple application. This is just a simple page. We have a combo box where you can select your language. We have an indicator which language is selected, and we have a date time control. This is where I can show you the effect, what happens if you do it, if you're not doing it right. So I simply refresh this. Okay, we have connected. We have to set it to default. And first of all, we have a list of all available languages in the application. So let's switch it to German, Deutsch it says, and let's open the date time control. And well, this makes sense to me, not to all of you, but for me it makes perfect sense to see it all in the German language. Now let's switch it to the English language. Okay, English. And let's see what happened to our date time control. It looks good, but when we open here, it is still in German. And it's getting even worse if we switch to Chinese. And the poor Chinese man, what would he see? A German date time control, which does not make much sense to him. Okay, let's take a look at our second example. Now we have still Chinese as the selected language. Let's open it here. And you see it switched to Chinese. So how does this happen? Or why didn't it work in the first sample? Switch back here. Open my Firebug, and when we look at the HTML, you can see where the problem starts. It starts here with the locale setting, which is set to German. This is quite clear because obviously I'm using a German browser, so this is the browser language. We go into the header and look what happens to our Dojo. We can see here it is set to German DE. So I can switch to Chinese, I can switch to English, I can switch to Spanish or whatever. It doesn't change the browser language. It doesn't change the resource language of the Dojo controls. In our second example, if you take a look at the browser locale, you see it's changed to Chinese. And also all the where is it? I don't find it. Here it is. All the resources from the Dojo also use now the Chinese language or whatever language you choose. It is not only that the controls are affected. But also, if you take a closer look at the resources they are loaded, you now see this is, for example, the validation JavaScript, which contains also language-specific strings. You now see this is Chinese. If I wouldn't do it right and still have the German language in place, the Chinese user would be presented with German messages, which does not obviously make any sense to him. So over to my designer, and let's see how we did it. So basically, the first example what we had is a combo box. We have a computed field, and we have the date time control. And let's take a look at the source code. First of all, where do all these languages in the drop-down box come from, in the combo box come from? This is a simple line of code, a single line of code, which is here, and it gets all the available locales from the system and sorts them ascending or descending, whatever you want, and present it to you in the combo box. The second part, the language, this is the language switcher, the combo box. The second part, which we need, are so-called properties files for each language. You can name them any way you want, but you have to have a country code in front of them to indicate or to let you choose in your code which language to use. And these properties files are bound to a so-called bundle. This LBS for labels is the variable you can use in your JavaScript, in your server-side JavaScript code to access this bundle. And you see some code here. This is typically some code a beginner in XPages would write. Maybe I'm blaming IBM because I took it from an IBM template somewhere. I can't remember where, but it was in there. So this is the way in this application the language is detected and handed over to the REST bundle variable, which built with this fixed string, which builds a, for example, REST bundle contains DE or EN, it's DE point, lang point properties, and this is the file that it gets accessed when the page is loaded. So when you switch the language in the combo box, the variable in REST bundles will change, and this accesses the file, and you have your label, for example, which is here, which says Deutsch or English or Chinese, and this gives you, as a return value, it gives you the language-specific string. So it does not change the locale at all here in this code. So let's take a closer look at sample number 2. We have the same code here for selecting the bundle, but we have additional code in the before render response event of the page, which also accesses the same session scope variable and builds some string out of it and puts this, it gets the view root and puts the calculated variable into the locale, into the browser locale. This is what we saw in Firebug, where it changed from Chinese to English to German and so on. So this is server-side JavaScript, and we could stop here, but I would like to show you a third example. It's still the same page, but the code looks a little bit different. We still have a bundle, a resource bundle here, but the code is much shorter, it's much more maintainable, and you might be missing the before render response event in this code. What I'm using here and also, if you look here in the at the combo box, the selected item is missing the server-side JavaScript code for getting the available locales, but only has these available languages in expression language that do some kind of stuff. And what am I doing here is I have some piece of Java in place, a so-called face listener, which can be used for not only setting the the locale of a page, but also for other things. But in this specific case, I'm using it for setting the browser locale, and the magic happens here in this before phase, and we see before render response phase, the view set local get language basis context is put into the view root of the page, and this changes the language for the whole page. The advantage is that you do not have to put the server-side JavaScript code into every page. You just have to have the localization setter or something like this in place, and it will do all the magic for you. I just start this, and we see it here. What we see here, the list is much shorter now, and this is because I had these available languages in place. And well, why did I do this? If you have the whole list of available locales in place, you will run into a error if the resource file does not exist. And I would like to work around this and only have to have these the available languages selectable in the combo box. And so I built another piece of Java which reads the design elements from my application and builds the list of all available resources. All the code you can download from my page. I will put it up later. You can put all these tiny bits and pieces into your own application, which makes it very easy for you to enable your application for multilingual usage. Also, a third part of the localization setting mechanism is the variable resolver, which gives you a single variable that you can access in your server-side Java code via expression language, and does all the calculation in background. It gets length files. This is accessing the design element, and so on. And this gives you all the magic you need for your multi-language application. So that's all for today from me. So I hand over to Mark.
Thanks, mate.
Make presenter. Okay. Oops.
Can you see me now? We are seeing your screen, Mark. Brilliant. Okay. Thanks so much. So this morning I'm going to talk about speeding up Domino Designer. And that could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But what I'm actually going to talk about today is just some productivity tips that I have found when working with resources and custom controls within Designer. Okay. I am Mark Roden. I work at PSC Group based in Schaumburg in Illinois. And you can find out some more information about me on my blog, on email, Twitter. You can ping me on Skype. I was very fortunate enough to be named, elected, whatever the phrase is, an IBM Champion this year. And it's been a lot of fun. So what I'm going to talk about today, and it's going to mostly be a demo, is first of all, don't use resources. Don't use resources in your XPages. How we can better use our custom controls and manage our development environment, and then how you should use resources. So this is basically, I will jump straight into my demo and we'll take a look at what's going on. And not on my server. There we go. All right, so this is my jQuery demo database. This is available for download from my blog. And what I've done is I've just set up a little example today. So I've created this ATLCC XPage, and if we look at the source code, there's nothing in it. As you can see, as I go in and out of it, it's nice and responsive, it's nice and quick. Okay. If I want to add a resource to it, In this case, I'm going to pick a style sheet, and I'm purposely going to pick a large style sheet. This style sheet is about 650K unminified. And I add that to my XPage. We can look at the source, and we can see we have the style sheet. Okay. We can go in and out of the XPage, and you can see it's still relatively responsive. But look what happens when I copy and paste the style sheet. So when I copy and paste the source code, what it's going to do is it's going to add the style sheet to the XPage multiple times. So I'm going to do paste, 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 paste. And as you can see, each time it gets slower and slower, which is a little odd because I haven't really done anything yet. And when I save it, it's kind of slow. And when I go back into it, for no good reason, my designer is now slow. Well, there is a good reason why a designer is slow, is because when you add resources like this, the XPage, to be able to show it in design mode, is rendering, or it's trying to get hold of that CSS file, and it's trying to put it onto your page. So every time you do something in your designer client, this is happening with your JavaScript resources, your CSS resources, wherever it's pulling in. And as we're going to see, any of your custom controls with their resource and what have you, it is really slowing up your designer experience. So the more you have, the worse this is going to get. And this is why you shouldn't use resources. However, that said, we all know that using resources does have its advantages, primarily because if we look at the database properties, we know that we can, with 853 and above, we can use the optimizes JavaScript and CSS resources. If you use resources within your XPage, they can be optimized, and that is very beneficial. So, what can we do about this? I'll come back to this. And you'll see it's slow, it's thinking, it's thinking. Once they're all gone, we're speeding up again. So this is often a cause of slow performance in Designer that I've seen on a number of occasions. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to build out an XPage. I'm going to drag in my common container. What I've done with this site is I've tried to bootstrap enable it using an external source. And within my, if we look at my common container, you'll see that we basically, I add some HTML and do a bunch of stuff, but then I have these 4 callback facets. These are basically just different areas that I can add information onto my page within the common container. But immediately on the screen, I now have to go find them. And when I take my content from my custom controls and I drag them in here, I then have to go find them again. And I'm going to add a couple more in just for giggles, because I can. And I keep going, and picker. Suddenly, this becomes rather a complicated page, and I have to hunt and pick and find stuff all over the page. It's also going to make it slow, because not only were you rendering the resources, as I showed before, you're now actually rendering all of this into Designer so that it looks pretty. So if I just save this, I actually I'm going to build it. I'm going to load it up in my web page. You can see that we've now created our XPage. Okay, which you can poke around and it'll hopefully do stuff, and it's an XPage. And it's a big XPage. Okay, fine. It's a bit difficult to manage and figure out what's going on, and this has only got 3 custom controls on it. You could have a lot more. You could have dialogues. You could have all sorts of stuff. And the more you add, the more it slows it down. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this all again. But what I'm going to show you is this thing in the custom control called, when we actually find it, called the design definition. Okay, so what the design definition does is it allows us to display the custom control in a different way than it actually wants to be rendered in the first place. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this code snippet and paste it into here. So what this is going to do is this is going to say that when I pull this common container onto my XPage, show this instead. The rest of the functionality within the common container still works perfectly well, but only display this. So I'm going to save that. And when I go back over here to my custom control, and I drag in common container, you can now see it looks completely different. Okay, it's a common container. I know what's on it. I don't need to see it every time. But my facets are now laid out really nicely. Let me take another snippet. Let's go over to the Pines Notify. And then let's do the same thing over here with the design definition for Pines Notify. And we'll go out to there. And you'll see when I actually drag the Pines Notify in now, that's all it says. And if I save this and I build it and go back to the web page, you'll see that it still works perfectly fine. But now I'm not actually slowing up my designer because all it's rendering is it's only rendering what's in the design definition. So this immediately is making my designer experience quicker. If I want to go and work on Pines Notify, fine, I can go and work on Pines Notify. I can still see all of this. When I open my X page, it's not going to render all of this information, making it quicker. All right? So what I did earlier was I created this TLCC lots of style, which you can see is really slow. And we've seen this before. Okay? So we can see all these style sheets. It's slow. And it's slow. And my design is really slow. And when I go over here and I drag this into my page, it's slow. It's slow. It's really, really slow. There's nothing there, but my X page is now really, really slow. So if I go out and I come back in again, oh, sorry, it's actually really, really slow. When I come back into it, it's really, really slow. My design is locked up. Well, guess what? We can do exactly the same thing with the resources. So if I actually go over here, I go back into my custom control for lots of style, which is really, 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 really slow, and add a design properties for and go out to there. That's really, 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 really slow. Okay. And go back out of my really, really slow X page. When I go back into my X page, you'll see it loaded instantly. And I can see a lot of resources here. And my resources now get loaded onto my page. Hopefully, somewhere. I promise you they are. But now they're loaded, and this X page is really quick. And that is a very simple way to speed up using Domino Designer. It's to actually segregate the things that are slowing it down, move them into a place where you're not going to need them, because once you've added a resource, you don't need to go back and play with it and change with it through this interface. But what this does is, it gives you a way to speed up your Domino Designer. There are other ways you can speed up Designer using looking at the Java heap and changing out the notes.ini. But this is just a very simple productivity thing for me. And I also think it actually helps you build your application better because you're going to separate things that do certain things into certain areas. And that's about it, really. Nice and simple and pretty quick. So what I will do now is I guess I will stop sharing and I will give presentation back to Howard. If I can remember how to. Where are you, Howard?
Mark, if you go into the participant.
I got it. Yeah, I got it.
Howard, I think you may be muted still.
Yep, working on that. Okay, thanks, Mark and Jesse and Ulrich. So we got some questions queued up already. Just a reminder, how to ask questions. Use the Q&A pane at the top, and you'll see the questions there. And we're going to, Paul and I are going to ask the questions to the presenters. and they will answer verbally. So we're just going to use the Q&A pane to get your questions, but we'll respond to the questions verbally. Just a reminder, we'll leave this slide up while we're answering the questions. We got a couple upcoming events, TLCC and Team Studio, but also let me point out the first event on April 23rd. IBM is doing a webcast on the Mail Next. So if you also are interested in the direction IBM's taking with Mail and Domino, that's something you might want to attend to kind of get a glimpse of what they're planning for the future. And then there's a couple events at the bottom of the list. For those folks in Europe, there's a Social Connections event in Prague in June. And then for those in the U.S., you might want to start making your plans now. MWLUG should be a great event. They're starting to, didn't open up registration yet, but I believe it's going to open up real soon. MWLUG is August 27th for 3 days. Okay, Paul, you got some questions queued up?
Yeah, we'll start with a question from Henry. And this is a general question, so we'll throw it out to the panel. The question is the challenges of migrating to XPages development from traditional notes and Domino development, and what changes to the development and test process you've implemented. Specifically, what type of SCM implementation, source control management implementation, and team development management. Alice?
Okay, well, I'll have a go. I kind of knew this was coming actually because Henry hit me up on Skype the other day saying, giving me a heads up that he was going to ask this. So I think for a start, those who are familiar with XPage development in teams is that there are certainly issues around the build process, primarily because we have taken compilation from the server at runtime to compilation on the client at build time, pre-compiling. Basically what that means is you can only compile what's on your computer. So if you're working on a team and multiple developers are connecting to the same database, either replicating stuff in or all working on the same server, unless you've got all of the current code, what can happen very frequently is you start to build over each other. And code gets lost very, very quickly. So what we have implemented internally is that we all use source control. We've used Bitbucket. I know that you can use Git or Mercurial. We use there's a Atlassian product whose name escapes me now. I'm sure someone can jump in and tell me. SourceTree. To sync with the Mercurial repository that we've created. So we all develop on a local server, so we build automatically to our own heart's content with our own code, and then we all check it into the central repository. And there are different ways for controlling merge management. You can either have individual branches per developer and one merge master, or you can give the responsibility to each individual developer to make sure that they merge their code in correctly if two people have been working on the same thing. What we did find and have found is going back to 8.5.2, source control was not very good, especially around the old Domino elements, views, agents, things like that. Stuff got lost. But now we're doing it on R9. We seem to have no problems. Or we do have problems, but they're usually people-related rather than source control-related. So that's how we handle things from the development side. But gone a lot are the days where anybody can throw up a notes database on a server and basically just give it to the customer. And ultimately, the customer's the one that does the testing. Those days don't exist anymore. Or if they do, you're very lucky. But customers' expectations have changed. And frankly, quality costs. So if a customer doesn't want to do the testing and he fully expects to get a fully tested product before it gets out there, you have to have a documented process to be able to ensure that quality comes out of your development team. And quality requires requirements. So, and which is also very difficult to get out of the customer that just says, hey, you know, I want to do this, I want to do that, and, you know, make it look good. That's not good enough as a requirement. So you really have to get a good level of investment from the customer to be able to define their requirements well. And if they're not prepared to do that, then you have to be prepared to do it for them. Because ultimately, it's going to be, the expectation is on you to be able to deliver what they want. So you have to get that information out of them. You can go through requirements documents. You can write out use cases. You can do traceability matrix, you know, depending on how much the customer is willing to pay, long-term maintainability, all sorts of things like that. Ultimately, you should also do test scripts. And to me, test scripts are, in a sense, the most important part of this whole process. Because if you can get your customer to sign off on a test script that says, yes, if this test script passes, then I'll be happy, then you have something that's written down and defined that says if they check all of the boxes on your test script and say it's finished, then it's finished and it's delivered. It also stops scope creep because it wasn't in the test. Well, okay, it doesn't stop scope creep, but it gives you something that you can throw back in their faces and say, look, this is what it said, this is what we agreed to. And that whole process is a very different experience than old world Domino that basically says, you guys get on with it. We have great testers. Our testers are the customers. They'll do it. No, they won't. And that's what gives design shops, IT shops a bad name. And it's not because, you know, it's just the customer needs to be educated as to what they're asking for and what that really means, and what you have to do to be able to create that for them is very different than it used to be. And it's also the right thing to do is to not lean on your customers to make them do the testing. You know, that's not what they're expecting, that's not what they want. And if you give them something that's buggy, that's the first impression they get of the application, and it's never a good one. How's that work?
All right, great. Any of the panelists care to add any comments to that? Jesse or Ulrich?
No, I think there is nothing to add to.
Yeah, that was a great explanation, Mark.
Yeah, I agree. I second everything you said. I mean, I think it's actually generally good that one of the benefits of the potential downsides of XPages is that it does kind of force us as a developer community to sort of grow up when it comes to software processes and source control. I mean, I know I never, you know, I was always one of the types who would easily go into a production database. Like, that was never a good idea. And so the fact that now there are like costs to that potentially, and so that it kind of enforces local replicas, source control, source management among teams, and just more care, I think it's a very good side effect of the changed nature of development. And it also applies to, you know, old style Node development as well. Like now, especially as you mentioned, views and forms and things are better with DXL than they used to be. There's nothing stopping you from using all of these techniques with classic legacy Node apps. It's just less. You can get away with more, but you necessarily shouldn't.
Okay, and also, you know, I think the other thing too is as we move into XPages and get more separation from the front end to the back end, and start using Java for a lot of the back end, that you have the ability to do a lot more unit testing, and then opens up the whole world of Java tools that have evolved out there to manage your testing. So as you get a lot more experience and start incorporating that, you know, moving more and more to a Java backend, that definitely is something you might want to look at. We have a question from Alan asking about the XPages extension library components that ship in 901. How different are they than the OpenNTF versions for 901? And then how different are they from 853? Anyone care to answer?
Well, I think the OpenNTF XPages library is still a little bit ahead the built-in extension library 901. They fixed some bugs on OpenNTF which are not yet fixed in 901, obviously. The difference between the 853 and the 901 for me is the section of the mobile components, mobile controls. They are much more sophisticated in 901 than 853. So I'm currently working with the 901 mobile controls, and it's a great fun to do.
Yeah, actually, in that area, in the latest OpenNTF build, they've added a number of enhancements, especially in the upfront part when you create your mobile app. In terms of it does a lot of things for you, and by the use of a wizard that asks, how do you want your app to look like? And it basically kind of goes off and builds that. So you have the initial starting point. And also in the latest release, they added some enhancements to the relational controls that go work with relational databases in terms of connection pooling. So clearly the OpenNTF version is cutting edge. Not only that, it also, as you mentioned, has the bug fixes.
Yeah. Right, there are still some things missing in terms of mobile controls. For example, the data view, it does not let you use checkboxes in the data view like you can do in the normal in the browser version of this control. It's the same control, but it behaves a little bit different on the mobile device and in the browser. I talked to Tony McGuckin, and he's about to fix it, or he's about to provide a workaround. By the way, I developed a workaround last weekend, and now I have built it in the application. Maybe it makes its way into the extension library someday. So I hope so.
Okay, Paul, yeah, next question.
Yeah, a couple of questions, and these were prompted during your presentation, Jesse. So one question from Slobodan. Is there an OSGI or server console command to force garbage collection and to identify any orphaned objects in memory? Another related question from Andrew, and this is specifically to Jesse. Is there any way to visualize how many handles are open, some kind of Java heap dump for our Domino handles?
Question, I think if you're talking about like actual Java memory usage, the way to go generally with that is to do a Java heap dump. There's a command that basically just takes everything that's in Java memory and spits it out to a file on disk. And then there's a tool called, I think it's the IBM memory analysis tool or something along those lines, which is an Eclipse-based tool that can read those files. And it has to be IBM's because the heap dumps generated by IBM's JVM are different from the ones from standard like Oracle JVMs. But that will let you go through and see which objects are available. And so if you're in a situation where you're actually having Java memory issues, I think it's like the Java lang out of memory exception, or maybe error. If you're in a situation where you're having those, I think generally the best route is taking a heap dump and then going through it with that tool. I don't know if there. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of Java level command to force garbage collection, but I think usually that wouldn't necessarily clean things up. Certainly, it wouldn't clean up the handles unless you're using the OpenNTF API. Because usually the garbage collection, generally, if you're running out of memory, it's a problem of intentionally storing lots of objects in memory rather than objects that have gone out of scope not being garbage collected. So in that case, it's more of a kind of like post-mortem analysis using the memory analysis tool, like figuring out how you generated these and like if they're being stored in application scope somewhere or if they're all in a view or something like that. And as for the visualizing how many handles, there's a chance that there might be a way to see the number of open handles. I'm not 100% sure on that. Regardless, it's not something that is generally easy to do. Like there's no, administrator pain just saying, all right, there's, 50 database handles open, 10,000 document handles open. It's relatively opaque. I'll look into that a little, and if I find something, I'll tweet about it. But as far as I know, there's not really a great way to do that.
Ulrich, would you care to add? So I know you've talked in some of your sessions before about some of the performance tools and I was in the heap.
Yeah, this is exactly the tool Jesse mentioned. I was talking about.
Yes, well, actually, if anyone, Ulrich, when did we do that? You talked about that. I think it was December. There's a presentation at our site on YouTube, and the slides are available on XPages Performance. And Ulrich referred to that tool and had some slides on that and some comments on that. So to learn more about that, the heap analyzer, you might want to go view our previous presentation on XPages Performance.
Mm-hmm. I think there is also a tool which costs a fortune that you can use, but lets you analyze all the Java stuff, what's going on your Domino server. I'm not sure what the name is. I can find it out, or maybe some other know. But it's not a free tool. You have to pay for it, but it does a really good job in benchmarking your Java agents or your SGI plugins and whatever you have.
Okay, we have a question from Thomas. And Thomas has a notes database that has a lot of rich text content that was created in the notes client, inline images, attachments, sections, tables, things like that. Is there any way to display this rich text data, I guess, like he says, like traditional web tasks, traditional Domino would attempt to convert it to HTML and either do a decent job or a bad job? Are you guys aware of how that would work in an XPages environment? I mean, it will try to convert it to MIME.
Yeah, you can set the form properties to store HTML and MIME and then display the HTML part in your XPage. That should work.
I don't think there's anything specifically XPages that I'm aware of that would be any better or worse than you could be able to do it in old Domino. There's no good way, basically. In an old database, I actually wrote something that basically put each rich text field up on a web page, grabbed the HTML, saved the HTML, and converted it that way, but you're still at the mercy of the server as to how it actually creates the HTML. And that's no different in XPages than it was in Domino before.
Yeah, the XPage, like if you're displaying a rich text field, it uses the same low-level conversion routines that it used to. If you're using a input rich text control, there are some options there to at least warn you when it knows there are going to be problems in the conversion. Basically saying it's going to convert it to HTML. And there's some other tweaks for as far as if you want to keep document links as notes links or HTTP links. None of them are going to all of a sudden make the fidelity that much better, but there are at least a couple things here and there. But for the most part, you're still throwing yourself at the mercy of the Domino HTML renderer.
Yeah, two resources I'll throw out there. First of all, the person who knows the most about notes rich text is Ben from a company called Geniisoft. That's G-E-N-I-I-S-O-F-T. And if you have any questions on rich text, he has a number of products. Send him an email, and I'm sure he has a product that would do something for you in terms of converting from notes rich text to HTML. He's been doing it for many, many, many years, and probably knows more about that than IBM. The other resource which I'm just vaguely aware of, having seen it at the Engage conference, is a company called ePhox. It's E-P-H-O-X. Has a editor that is supposed to fit into XPages to replace the rich text control, the standard, editor, which is supposed to have a lot more fidelity, a lot more capability, similar to what you can do in the Notes client. Not sure what they do in terms of displaying rich text. I think it's more on the content creation side, but it's worth giving them a call. They're out of Australia, but have offices in, I believe, the U.S. as well.
Okay. Ulrich, I've got a couple of questions related to your presentation, but just before that, Howard, there's a number of questions from the attendees on where to get the slides, how are we going to get the slides, some questions about getting the demonstrations as well. Can you comment on that?
Well, the demonstrations are each presenter, if they're going to put up the demonstrations, they can put a link on their slide. But the slides themselves will be bundled together, and a link will be put in an email that will be sent out to you along with a link to the recording to this webinar, and that you should get in the next few days. So everyone who attended or even registered will get that those links to the recording and the slides.
Okay, so Ulrich, a couple of questions. One from Uli. Where can you set, or where did you set in the application for the user to choose the language? I think that's related to where they were selecting from the drop-down. And another related question, very specific from Slobodan. In your code, you had a variable FC, and was that a reference to the basis context?
I will answer the second question first because it's the easier one. Yes, it's faces context. And the first one, where can the user select the language? Did I understand this right?
Yes.
You can put it everywhere in your application. You can put it in every control you have and put it in every place. Left corner, right corner, button, top, wherever you want. Is that the answer?
You know, I think that's it. You know, it's hard to tell. I mean, it's a short question. Let me just post it here. If we could have you take a look at your question and repost if that's not the answer.
Okay.
Howard, did you have another question?
Yeah. I had a question actually on from Don. This might be good for Mark. Any tips on speeding up Designer when using view controls? On large databases, they can be painful.
Without being facetious, don't use view controls. No, not really, because the problem is that, you know, the view control does what it does, and you can make it worse and worse by making it look further and further for your data. So if you're looking into databases that are not this one, and you're looking into complex views, then it really can get slow. And unfortunately, there's not much you can do about that. There are lots of other options for presenting data to users. I personally don't like the view control because whilst it is quick and easy for the developer to create one, and it does meet the requirement of getting data to the screen, there's not a good user experience. Nobody likes paging, and frankly, once you get past page 2, nobody's looking at anything past that anyway. So, no, I'm afraid I don't have any good way of speeding up view control.
Okay. And I guess the data view would have similar problems. He specifically said Designer, so I'm not sure if in Designer why the view control or the data view would matter. Like, obviously, when you view the X page, that's another story.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, honestly, the person to ask about that is Brad Balasaitis, One of the guys that works at PSC, his blog is accelerant.net. He's the man to ask about data controls.
Yeah, so Brad, just to elaborate on what you said, Marky, Brad has maybe 30 blog entries, lots of detail on how to use data grids and basically replacements for the view control.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we had a question from David, who has a server, had the OpenNTF extension library, and then they put upgrade pack 1 over it. Not sure why they would do that. This broke the existing XPages application. How can we get them to work as before? Before you guys have any response, I would say the first thing would be to uninstall UP1 and put back your extension library. I don't know if you guys have any experience with that.
Yeah, there were some. Sorry?
Yeah, if you have the extension library installed before you upgrade to UP1, it will blow up. You must not mix installations of extension library. And when it uninstalls itself, it doesn't. It's kind of like Windows. It leaves stuff lying around. So you must make sure that you clean up your existing extension library before you put a new one in there.
Yeah, there is also an article on the IBM Wiki or on OpenNTF, I'm not sure about this, describing the differences between the upgrade pack and the extension library. They have made some changes in the namespace, and also some attributes have changed, so this will break your application. And this article describes in detail what you have to do to make it work again.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Hey, Howard.
Yes.
Brad, who's actually listening to this, actually just sent me the answer to the view control one. If you have the view control where the source is pointing directly at the database, the view, and what have you, it does seem to try and access the resource every time you type and do something. However, if you compute the source and the view, it seems to not do so anymore. But once you do that, you then lose the ability to, because what it's really doing is it's making sure that there are no columns or what have you. If you compute the source, then you lose the ability to pick the columns and do what have you. But if you're already done with it, then compute the source and it will stop looking it up. So that's the answer from Brad.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's great. Thanks, Brad. Yeah, that would make sense. So once you get your view control the way you want it, just go in and change those properties for the columns or for your data source to compute it, and then your designer should be a lot quicker. That's not going to do anything when you actually render the XPage, of course, but make your designer work a lot quicker. So thanks again, Brad. Paul, you got one?
Yes, a question from Tony. When working with the separate XPage design database model, so your legacy data, you're going to keep that, in their separate NSFs, and you're going to consolidate all of your XPage design. For those multiple NSF applications, you're going to consolidate that into a single NSF. The question is, how do you handle source control management for those views that are serving up your data sources for your XPages that are pointing to those views in the other NSFs? Anyone?
I've taken to creating separate app and data databases as a matter of normal work. So like even if I only have the one, I have separate data and app. And the way I do it is that I just have both of them set up for source control, and I put them in the same repository. So in this case, they're intricately bound, because any new version of one is going to involve a version of the other. And then when I'm ready to roll out to production, I just double the task of creating an NTF and then replacing the design. If they are not necessarily always going to be in the same project, you can still, there's nothing stopping you from doing source control for a forms and views application. especially in newer versions. Now that if you're using binary DXL, I think that's particularly safe. So that's good for newer versions of notes specifically. And so that's basically I just do the same thing for both, and then just roll out 2 templates instead of 1 when I want to roll out to production. And that has worked out nicely. They can easily be in different repositories if they're basically different projects, which would involve coordination between the 2 to make sure you don't break expectations between them. But it's still, there's no reason you can't do the same sorts of things with a classic Forms and Views app as you do with XPages app.
All right, thanks, Jesse. Got a question from Juan. He has an XPage that has 2 data sources, 2 documents, and when he goes to save the second data source, it doesn't save it. He's saving doc2.save, for example. I was wondering if anyone has an idea of what could be wrong.
What was the setting? Ignore requests?
Yes. So there are a number of different things that could be causing the problem. If you open your XPage from a view control, for example, you'll see that the URL contains whatever.xsp and action equals edit document and doc ID equals a unit. That supersedes whatever you tell, in many cases supersedes whatever you tell the data source to do for the second one. So as Ulrich said, there is a setting that says ignore request parameters, which is a property of the data source, which will stop that from overriding. You've also got to make sure that your data source is set to scope of request, because otherwise, when you save the first document, that document source then stays in scope, and you will have problems resaving it or changing it, and can affect other data sources as well. So, I mean, those are a couple of things, but without really seeing the code, it's kind of difficult to know whatever might be going on.
Okay, thanks, Marky. We got a question from Douglas, kind of relates to what Jesse, you spoke about. He has a database connection and a JavaScript function, and he recycles the database object. However, it invalidated the database connection he had on the rest of the XPage, even though it was named something else. So I guess basically both those variables were pointing to the same database object. Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, that's actually, I don't know if it's completely consistent with every method, but generally if you fetch the same conceptual Domino object, even if it's 2 completely separate variables, they will be the same backend handle, which is technically a feature. But it can lead to weird problems if you are doing recycling of those larger containers, which is actually one of the reasons why I like to hold off on recycling things like databases or potential views if I'm using in multiple places, just because you can run into these problems. So if you do like session.getDatabase, blank names.nsf in one place, and then in another section, session.getDatabase blank names NSF, those are most likely going to be the same handle. So if you recycle it in one place, it's going to be recycled in the other. And like I was saying, I'm not sure if this happens 100% of the time. Like if you get the same document by node ID in one place and then the same node ID elsewhere, those might be the same handle. It's probably safest to assume they are. This can lead to weird problems. I believe there are, I think I saw something just the other day, a blog post about if you have a document and then you loop through a view that contains that document, if you recycle the same document, like the same UNID document, it will recycle your original object as well. So that is definitely something you have to be careful of. Again, another good case for the OpenNTF API because it handles tracking of all the handle IDs for you. But that is definitely the case where if you fetch the same object in multiple places, they are the same backend handle, even though they're different Java objects.
All right, thanks, Jesse. And while we're talking about the OpenNTF API, Sasha had a question. They're using the OpenNTF API in a Java agent, not on XPage. And I guess there was a jar file that had to be included that he can't find in the latest build. I guess it's M4.5. Are you aware of that? I don't know if you do any native Java agent work.
Yeah, that is true. I think basically, we'll aim for the next release to include the jar file as well. It is true that in some of the older ones, there was a separate jar file, and in the newer ones, it's just packaged as the plugin. That's mostly because the primary use that we saw was that people were using it in XPages, and they vastly wanted the plugin instead of the standalone jar. But there's no reason that both can't. Well, it's a little tricky if you do want to do both on the same server, because if you have the jar in JVM Live X and then you also have the plugin that contains the classes, you can lead to some class cast problems. So I think what I'll aim to do is provide some explanation to package with the release of, like, here's, if you're using in these different scenarios, which you should use. You can, if you want to right now, pull the source and build the jar file from the org OpenNTF Domino project. I've actually done that very frequently myself, just for testing purposes. So you definitely can do that, and I'll aim to have in the next release a standalone jar with an explanation of when you want to use it.
All right, thanks, Jesse. So I guess the answer there is, one easy answer is just use a down level version, one of the down level builds that had the jar file. Paul, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question from Milan. He has an XPage application that will crash from time to time, and it works fine again after it's rebuilt. What can be the cause of this? And I'm going to extend that. If that's too general a question, the question to the panelists, or to rephrase it, where do you start to try to troubleshoot that? What approaches would you take to troubleshoot that?
I think of that would be related to this. One is a potentially easy fix, which is in the in 853 and above. There's an option in the XSP properties file to refresh design or refresh application on design change. This will fix particularly if you see something that says class cast exception, X is not compatible with X. That's something that I've seen in larger apps, especially if there's a lot of Java design elements involved on older releases. And I think this can still happen on newer releases if you don't have this set. So it'll be weird things. Like I had it at one point, one of my apps, like if I just change a document, then the whole app will become unavailable because of this problem. But checking that box will generally fix that. Alternatively, if the problem is more about, it could be running out of memory. Like if you're storing a lot of things in application scope or in session scopes and you have a lot of users, that could just potentially bloat it up, and then rebuilding the app will flush all of those as well. So that could be a side effect. Those are the two main things. Really, anything where you are storing something in a long-running scope is something you may want to check into. Either if you're storing too much in there, or if you're storing things that will, for one reason or another, eventually cause a problem. It's generally best to look there. So I would start with that checkbox option, just because I haven't found a situation where you don't want that. And then secondarily, I would start tracking down what you're storing in those long-running scopes.
Well, let me add to that. Also, the first part to look in is your log files. To start in the Domino log file, and then go from there. Probably have to backtrack to some of the XPages log files, because we'll probably reference an error in those. So that might help too if you find the actual error message that was thrown. Okay, we have a question. This is probably going to be the last one from Pooja. Is there any way to import a Java package at the XPage level? I guess instead of importing it at the database level, I don't know if you can import it at the control level or the XPage level. Maybe he's looking to do like a global import once, so then you can reference that throughout the XPage.
Probably there's no CI plugin.
Yeah, I guess in the other way would be if he did what am I thinking of, brings the package into the
Or in the JVM X or Xlibs or whatever, put it into a directory on the server so you can access it from every application.
Right. So there's a couple ideas there.
Question referring to like using a Java library, or is it referring to like, because I think the import package like as a function name, I think you might be talking about in server JavaScript when you do import package like java.util, so that way you can just do new hash map, which I mean that's just like a server JavaScript syntax convenience, but I do not know if there's a handy way to just say, all right, when I reference these objects in the later parts of the page, they're all, you know, consider this package imported. I'm not a server JavaScript expert.
Yeah, he said a user package is the clarification there. That helps. Okay, so I think we're right at our ending time here. So I'd like to thank all our panelists for spending their time answering your questions and presenting their topics today. And also like to thank everyone for attending. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. As a reminder, we will send out an email with the links to the recorded webinar as well as the slide database. So thanks everyone and take care.
Thanks everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.